Good evening, members, officers, members of the public. This is a meeting of the Development Control Committee. Start by advising you about the fire evacuation procedures. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so if we hear something remotely like a fire alarm, it probably is one. And if we do have one, you are asked to evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. The fire exits are there and there. And if you've been signed into the building, please don't rush away because we need you to gather in the edge of the Memorial Park so that we can make sure everyone who was signed in has left the building. We haven't had one in meetings I've chaired, and I hope this is not going to be an exception to that. While I'm on that subject of exceptions, we had an extraordinarily brief, very productive meeting of the committee last night, and I'm now draw your attention to the fact that sunset this evening is at 7:43. The meeting is being webcast, so that means that those who come forward, those who sit in the front row, will be seen behind those who speak to us, and if you come and speak to us, what you say will be recorded and broadcast on the web and used for future reference if any questions arise as to what happened in the meeting. Apologies for absence. I have apology for, I think, Councillor Dunlop and Councillor Watts replacing him. Is that right? Any other apologies for absence? Thank you. And that's either an Councillor Gardner replacing Councillor Taylor. Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest? Please.
Non-prejudicial. My son is an objector and lives opposite the Laverstoke brewery and no distillery.
Proposed distillery.
Proposed distillery.
Intended.
Thank you.
I have no urgent items and announcements. I have the minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody got any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? And if not, is it your will that I sign them? I'll do that at the end of the meeting. I don't have any referrals from other committees or from the council or from the cabinet. So we move on to the planning applications, and I'll explain the process as we get to the first application, which is the one associated with Laverstoke Mill. I have Mr. Taylor expected to speak. Are you here, Mr. Taylor? Is Mr. Taylor here? No? Anybody here in place of him speaking on this? No? Fine. In that case, I'll ask the officers to present the report, please.
Okay, item 1 is the application that seeks variation of condition 36 of permissions BDB 74953 and 76353 to allow construction works between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. at weekends. There's no update further to the main report, and the recommendation therefore remains to approve subject to the conditions listed in the report and completion of a deed of variation.
I don't have any ward members here to speak, so do we have any questions to the officers, please? No? Yes, Councillor?
Will this set a precedence that would be able to be used when we get people who have extensions or other such things in close proximity to housing occupied? It's my only concern.
Okay, I think given the nature of this development site and what it actually is, I think it's very exceptional in its context. I don't think it would necessarily be comparable to the developments of the nature you've just described there, so no, I don't think it would set a precedent in that nature.
Open it up to discussion or motions? No? Moved by one of these two and seconded by the other one. Leave it to officers to work that out. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Thank you. That's approved. Officers?
To confirm, the resolution is approved, subject to the conditions and the completion of the deed of variation.
Thank you very much. I move on to the second item on the agenda, which is Worthing Road, Basingstoke. I have Councillor Shaw and Councillor Cousins, who want to speak to us at some point. I don't appear to have any public speakers on this. No? Are you both going to speak? Okay, well, we'll get, if one of you, if you'd like to come forward, you're going to speak together, or are you going to separate your forces and have a couple of minutes each? Right, if you'd like to come forward. And you've got 4 minutes between you, or do we allow councillors 4 minutes each? We might allow 4 minutes each if they bang on a bit, yes. Nothing personal. Officers would like to present the report, please.
The application is for the proposed change of use from a residential dwelling to an 11-unit house in multiple occupation and the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, alteration to the roof and provision of on-site amenity space and vehicular parking. During the members' viewing, it was clarified that there are 8 vehicular parking spaces proposed to be at the rear of the site, and the size of those spaces accords with our adopted standards. In terms of the update, in summary, there's been no additional letters of public representation received, and the Conservation Officer, Landscape Officer and Urban Design Officer have raised no objection to the amended plans, subject to appropriate conditions. The amended proposal does respond to the initial concerns of the Conservation, Landscape and Urban Design Officers, and there's no objection on that basis. However, they have raised a number of specific design comments and reiterated some from their original responses, but officers remain satisfied that the amended proposal and the consideration set out in the main report are sufficient for approval to be given. There is also a minor point of clarification, just for members' awareness, is that in the report it makes reference to the fact that it's a house in multiple occupation that falls within use class C4. To correct that, that should be a house in multiple occupation which falls within the use class sui generis. That's just a minor point of clarification. It doesn't have any bearing in terms of the consultations that were undertaken or the proposal that's been put before you. The recommendation is amended for approval subject to the conditions listed in the main report.
Yes, please, Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. I called the application before the committee tonight due to a variety of factors which residents and I have over the proposed use to change it from residential to HMO. But first I want to make it clear that neighbouring residents and I welcome an application for this property. It has been left unused for quite some time and we are happy to see that something is on the table. We're also not anti-development, we just ask that the right developments come forward for the right locations, and it's on this basis that we feel that this application is not right for this area. The main reason residents have concerns is not necessarily because it's an HMO, but that an 11-bed HMO is excessive for this property, considering its location in a family-orientated residential area. Therefore, residents feel that approving the HMO would negate policies D4 and D1. We feel that, where possible, the number of rooms should be reduced to have a minimal yet acceptable level of development for the area. There is on-site parking for 8 vehicles. Our suggestion is that an 8-bed HMO is considered for this site. Parking is another area which residents feel that approving this application as stands would have an adverse impact on the immediate neighbourhood. Indeed, the application, as I said, has provision for 8 parking spaces and the remainder will be street parking. None of these spaces are allocated to any of the 11 bedrooms, so it will become a free-for-all when it comes to on-site parking. Indeed, on-street parking is also interesting. Worthing Road works under the council's permit system, and under the proposed changes by this council, there could be a limit as to how many permits a property could have. There's also not enough street parking in Worthing Road at present, which would mean that approval of this at the moment would equal complete saturation of parking in this area. Another aspect that we would ask the committee to consider is the potential increase in noise to the neighbouring community. With more people in one household, of course, there is an added risk of noise from this property, and with the surrounding houses having young families being raised, we don't wish for these households to be subject to any excessive noise during the evenings and into the night. And residents feel that this could be negated due to having less bedrooms for this application. So in conclusion, Chair and Committee, residents welcome the application as it shows us that there are ideas for use for this vacant property and that they are still coming through. However, we feel this is the wrong type of application for this property. Nevertheless, should the committee be minded to approve the use of an HMO, we would ask the committee to defer this application, allow the applicant and officers to work together and submit a modified proposal for an 8-bedroom HMO. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members have any questions for the ward councillor, please? Thank you, Councillor Cousins. Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Chair. I take the contrary view to Councillor Cousins in that, having been ward councillor for the area since 1998, I'm very much conscious of precisely how long this property has been empty and an absolute eyesore in the local area. And therefore, I am very keen to see a development being brought forward. And I think that this is the best and most practical proposal that has emerged for some time, and therefore would ask the committee to approve it. In terms of some of the details of it, I think the character and design of the proposal is actually an improvement on the existing. It reinstates what was the original roof line of the property in line with properties further along the road, and it retains the single point of access and a large part of the appearance of the front of the property. So there are valid character and design reasons for approval. In addition, I think on the issue of parking, as you'll be aware, the applicant has increased the number of parking spaces from that originally proposed, which was 5 to 8 in the application before you. I welcome that development, and Councillor Cousins neglected to mention that although there is restrictions on parking in Worthing Road itself, there is readily available parking round the corner in Atwood Close, and as you'll have seen from the applicant's parking survey, the applicant identifies a total of 21 potential parking spaces in Atwood Close, 3 of which are within a few feet of the actual property itself. So I think that parking issues have been adequately addressed in the application. I understand, that people have objections and concerns about houses in multiple occupation, but I'm very much conscious in the local area that actually, of late, the number of HMOs in the local area has actually reduced as some existing HMOs have been converted to other types of accommodation, and therefore issues of sort of saturation, which are sometimes referred to in this kind of instance, don't arise. So therefore, on the basis of the nature of the development, the character and the design, the parking that is provided, I would hope that you would approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Members have any questions for Councillor Shaw? Yes, please.
Could you perhaps sort of whereabouts on Atwood Close would this extra parking be? I mean, there's no indication at all on the map where it might be.
Officers may be able to help if they're able to bring up the survey that was submitted with the application. Or indeed another plan, but yes, I think that's a helpful plan because it shows the 3, I think, parking spaces that are immediately on the corner of Atwood Close and Worthing Road to the immediate side of the property. And in addition to that, there are further parking spaces in Atwood Close to the area, at the bottom and a little further on in the plan as shown.
Councillors, this is an extract from the traffic regulation order for the town centre. The darkish lines you can see there represent the double yellow lines where there's no parking allowed. Obviously the areas which haven't got the dark lines are standard areas of street where people can park their cars. And as the Councillor Shaw was saying, there's an area adjacent to the application site and further south in Atwood Close, next to the allotment area and the cemetery.
The green blob places say what the parking restrictions are, and the bits with no orange marking on them are available for anybody to park in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know what the current usage of those car parking spaces is? Because this is additional parking on top of what's already there.
The applicant provided a parking survey of the adjacent roads, Knight Close, Atwood Close and Worthing Road. In Atwood Close, I think, which is the area of interest to us, because that's where people would park, the highest recorded parking was six vehicles in the morning when it was surveyed, and 8 vehicles through afternoon into an evening. So as the councillor was saying, there's potentially 21 car spaces in the area.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask, I am right in assuming, am I not?
Sorry,
that-
Councillor Shaw.
Right, sorry. Is it correct to say that the survey produced by the applicant is a survey which has been produced by him, no third party, independent third party has had any input into that survey? It's a survey produced by the applicant himself.
I don't really have any knowledge of that, I'm afraid. I'm not party to any arrangement that the applicant has with his...
Just focus our attention on Councillor Shaw for the moment. Any questions for Councillor Shaw? We can go back to questions to officers in a moment. Anything else? Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Right, Sven, perhaps you'll try that on the officers.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for aiming it at the wrong person. And on previous occasions we have been informed, and I don't know whether this is still the case, that these sort of surveys which are produced by people putting forward developments are surveys which they have produced themselves, have not been looked at by an independent third body or by anybody from the council itself. Is that correct?
The survey was provided by the applicants. They contracted a company called Intelligent Data Collection Limited to carry out the survey. So yes, they funded it, but it was done by a third party.
Councillor Bound.
The times that you read out for the survey, that was a morning time and an afternoon time, was it? Because what about the night time where people are likely to be back from work?
Sorry, Councillor, I was just trying to sort of summarise. The evening ran from 6 o'clock through till 11:30. During that time, it started as 5 cars present, running up to a maximum of 8 at 8:30, and then reducing to 7 at 11:30.
Any other questions to officers? Open it up to discussion. Question, Councillor Potter.
I mean, firstly, in regard to parking provision, I wonder, obviously, I'm looking at page 32 of 64, Chairman, sorry, and third paragraph up. The statement is made, the application site is also considered to be located in a sustainable location within walking distance of local shops, and there are regular public transportation links to the town. In terms of the local shops, that's the emphasis on Morris, presumably. I guess that could be answered. Would that be right? Okay. And in regard to parking, in the paragraph below, the words used are, in light of the number of parking spaces proposed, the likely availability of on-road parking. A bit more equivocal, I guess, in the way that it's written. I mean, is there any concern about the sort of regularity of provision there that's suggested in the first part of the evidence on parking? Can I ask that? the likely availability rather than the availability? Is that qualified purely because you have no idea of demand from other places, I guess, really?
The likelihood is only based on the information provided in the surveys, Councillor. It was split over 2 days, a weekday and a weekend day. So there seems to be a general trend there. The parking presence is about 6 to 8 cars. There doesn't seem to be any variation at the moment. So if, say, all 11 units were to have cars, then we're looking at 3 displaced onto the carriageways, so there'll be room for those.
Could I just ask for officer comment in regard to the point I think Councillor Cousins made about possible further discussions with the applicant vis-à-vis the number of units within the proposed premises? I mean, we're all aware of HMOs in various places, and clearly from my own experience they do on occasions cause problem, particularly in regard to parking provision, but that's largely more dense residential areas than this, and clearly if you can get a total provision of parking for the number of units provided, it goes without saying that's an answer. I mean, would the officers be able to comment on the likelihood of further discussions with the applicant to reduce the provision within the unit, or does that make it economically unviable?
I don't think we've had any information specifically on economic viability, but I understand the decision around 11 units has come through protracted discussions about the future of the site, so that figure has been arrived at for reasons known only to the applicant. I suppose in terms of the approach towards potential further discussions or deferral of the item, I think that would be difficult for this application, because I think to change it from 11 to 8 would be a material change and would really require fresh application. So I think the issue would be, are there sound reasons to refuse this current application, which should then potentially lead to other discussions.
On the floor plans as produced, hasn't got a page number, I don't think. Room number 7. I'm presuming that it's got a vanity and wash hand basin, but up in the corner, but it's not marked as such. But it is on room 3, so.
So I think you're absolutely correct. It is the same vanity basin that was in room 3 that's replicated in room 7. It's just not been labelled on the drawing.
Chairman, I'm going to move the recommendation, because I think if you went into Basingstoke Town Centre and said name an empty building, this would come up as priority number 1. It's an eyesore. It's been an eyesore for a long, long time, and I think it needs to come into back into the fold and be used. So I'm moving the recommendation, and I have to say that I think when people say that it's in the middle of a residential area, there's industrial, for want of a better word. I don't know, does shops come under industrial? Retail, at least 2 retails, and small units, screw fix and others are around down the side there. You've got good bus links. So yes, I'm moving the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody interested in seconding that? Councillor Tucker? Yes?
Sorry, in seconding it, I did actually have a chance to talk to the case officer today about it. Did mention what has already been mentioned, that it would be very much nicer if we could have had less in numbers. But she was telling me that there has been a lot of toing and froing and discussions, and really this is the only viable option. So therefore I was quite happy with it and happy to second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Do you want to say something? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 concerns. Just because it's 11 flats doesn't mean there will be 11 residents. We've got a case in my ward where we've got 4 bedrooms and 11 residents there. My second concern, of course, is the parking. I worked opposite that site for the last 30 years, and no one's happier than me to see something happen in that house than this. But I question, first of all, that Atwood Close is a very busy road. Going back in history, Councillor Shaw will hopefully agree with me, The direct route from Winchester Road into Wharton Road was into Penrith Road. Now they've got the option for coming from Atwood Close into Knights Close, Stockley Close and down that way. So there's quite a lot of volume of traffic coming there continually to go into the shopping precincts. And secondly, that on the street parking, if you look at the map there where the parking was arranged, we observed it as we went viewing on Friday, that there is a lot of double lines. And the area which had only a single line was quite close to this property, but far enough away from the junction that it caused a problem. And that was only visible parking area, on-street parking, that we could see. And we have raised the question there, where will you put additional parking? Councillor Shaw has said that up to 21 parking spaces. Well, I won't say he's not right, I don't know, but it would concern me the fact that there seems to be a shortage of parking, and also the fact that the Atwood Road is a very, very busy road.
Any other discussion points? I think the issue about parking is we have some evidence from a survey, or funded by the applicant, and I think that's part of the evidence. The other evidence is the council's own allocation of parking controls there, or highways allocations of parking controls. That's the only evidence we have. Any other speakers? It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval, please. 7. Those against? That's carried. Officers?
Okay, members have resolved to approve, subject to the conditions listed on the main report.
We move on to the third item on the agenda, which is land to the rear of Sunnyside, Little London, Silchester Road, and I have Nicola Hughes. Would you like to just come forward? I don't think I've got any ward members. We've got ward members sitting at the table. So if you'd like to just come forward, and when it's your turn, you press the big wide black button, and one of the members will help if that's a problem. And when you've finished, if you press it again to turn it off, and then if people ask you questions, it's real tedious this, you have to press it to answer and then press it again so that the next person can get their two-penneth in. That's assuming they ask you any questions. If you just sit there for a second, we'll get officers to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 3 on the agenda is for the erection of stables, change of use of the field to equestrian, and creation of an access track at land to the rear of Sunnyside, Silchester Road, Little London. Members of the viewing panel viewed the site from the rear of the neighbouring property, Revisa, before moving on to view the site from the north-east access of the field. With regard to the update, the tree officer has raised no objection to the proposed development, and the officer's recommendation is one of approval.
Now, you have 4 minutes to speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicola Hughes, and I live at Sunnyside with my husband and my 3 sons, and I am the applicant for this planning submission. As I understand it, all the technical planning issues relating to the application have been complied with and are sanctioned in the planner's report and subsequent proposed conditions. My main reason for speaking tonight is to just give a bit of background about the project and why we want to do it. So as I've said, we're a family of 5, very well established in Little London. We've got lots of friends and family members in the local area. We have firmly established roots at Sunnyside, where we have lived for the last 7 years, and prior to that we lived just up the road in Silchester. Our 3 young sons attend the local primary school, which is the Priory in Charter Alley, and we're very happy where we are. We bought the field at the back of the house along with a couple of our neighbours about 2 years ago. We just thought it was a great asset to be able to offer our children as they're growing up. It was in a bit of a state, to be honest, as it had horses on it and it'd been overgrazed by the number of horses that were kept on it. Since owning the field, we have tended to it and are establishing good grazing land. My own personal aim, for quite a long time actually, has been to keep horses, and having the land at the rear of the house seems to be the perfect opportunity to do it. I would like to own a horse for me personally to ride, and I'd also like to own a pony to teach my young children to ride on. I've been riding for the last 15 years and am now looking forward to being able to do more as my youngest son is actually starting school tomorrow and I have more free time on my hands. If I owned horses, I would want to keep them obviously in the best possible way, and hence the quality stable that we're proposing in this application. I'd like to stress that it's no way a commercial venture, and we very much welcome the planning department's conditions restricting the use to private equestrian and limiting the number of horses to no more than 6. Regarding concerns of the stable being unattended, it's already been highlighted in the officer's report that there are 10 houses overlooking the field, 3 of which, including ourselves, part own the field. We can actually see the proposed stable from our garden. We have a loft room where we can see it, and also from the first floor we would be able to see it. I've timed myself walking across the field, which is about 280 metres. It takes a couple of minutes. Obviously, if I was to run, it would be a bit quicker than that.
If you could finish off fairly quickly, because we're running out of time.
We purposely positioned the stables away from the houses so as not to cause any objections to our neighbours. And we're not aware if there is a recommended distance that a stable should be from residential units, but we're certainly aware that nobody would want them too close to their properties. We also think it's logical to have it near the field gate to facilitate any vehicle movements connected with the horses. So just to summarise, we've had no objections from the local residents. We feel that the planning officer thinks that the planning requirements have been met, and just to reiterate that it's for a personal, private use, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And if you stay there for a second, do members have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Tucker.
Oops. Yes, I'm sorry we all came to visit you when you weren't there. But we were very much helped by the gentleman who lives next door. Can you sort of explain to me, will the land that is owned by the 3 of you be fenced off into 3? That's my first question.
Obviously, when the stable block's put in place and we want to get the horses, it would have to be fenced off to separate our area from the other 2.
My next question is, we noticed when we were there that behind all the houses there's been a whole strip divided up behind each of the houses. Sorry, can you hear? How long has that been there? Because it looked like it was just sort of overgrown grass at the moment.
Sorry, the strips directly backing onto the.
Yes, if I might say that actually on site they're all divided up. It's not one long strip, it's all divided up. And it just wondered, well, I don't know what you would call it, but it certainly obviously was part of the field, wasn't it?
So when the field came up for sale, what happened is the owner offered each of the 10 houses the opportunity to buy a strip of land immediately backing onto their garden, of which we own a little piece as well, and all of those neighbours have fenced off their bits, and to be honest, some of them have done some really nice things. Some of them have made orchards, some of them are making...
Can I just suggest you say nothing more about what people may have done? Because there may be some things that may be in breach of planning consent. We don't want to we don't make this a reason for getting everyone into serious trouble.
Sorry, I didn't mean to lead you into something wrong.
Any other questions? I mean, the question I had in mind was, if it's not clear from any of our drawings which portion of this land is yours, but presumably you own the land between the rear of your house and where the stables will be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to walk across it. Is that the case?
On the plan, it's actually, I've got a copy here, I don't know if everyone else has it, it shows clearly how the land is divided into 3 sections. So we own the middle section.
Do we have that? Is that in the application paperwork? Okay. I mean, but just to check the question, you can walk from the rear of your property to the stables across your land. So the other plots of land are separated off from the dwellings altogether. But my question, I'll get back to my question. My question was, given that you only own part of the land, why is it you're putting in a planning application for equestrian use for the whole of the land, as drawn on that diagram? Or have I missed something?
Oh, sorry. Because we spoke to our 2 neighbours and that the land was used for grazing, so we just thought when we'd submit ours, did they want us to do it for them at the same time? So it was just to help them, really. I mean, our application is for our middle piece of land is what we're concerned with, and obviously the stable block on our piece of land is what I'm concerned with. You know, this isn't a project as a whole piece of land, it's our middle section that we're looking at and what the application is for.
Councillor Goddison.
Thank you, Chair. I may have misunderstood it when I was on viewing panel, but I seem to have it in my mind that there was a strip along the end of the field which included the bit that the stable was on, which all 3 owners had access to. And so all 3 owners could come in through the gate and access the stables, and there was a strip along the back to which all 3 were, had a right of access. Is that not correct?
The gate does have a right of access to all 3 areas, but obviously in response to Councillor Tucker's thing, ours would be fenced off and the stables would be within our fenced off area. Does that answer it? So you'd be able to walk up a path at the back of the field, but then there'd be 3 separate entities within the field.
Can I say, I think on site we were told by your neighbour that they had to agree to leaving one bit open so that there was access all the way through. I think that's what Councillor is saying.
That's right. So from the gate there will be a path along the end of the field that everybody can walk on to access their lands. From Frog Lane you go through the gate and then there's a little, be like a path right way across the whole field for everybody. But then to the right of that path, that's where the individual pieces of land will be.
For the applicant? Yeah.
Sorry, I might have misunderstood the same as Councillor Goddison, but I understood your neighbour to be talking about something as wide as 10 metres when we were on site. He described it as I think that was the width that he described, which seemed to go, as I say, the sort of perimeter of all 3 areas of land, all of which seem to be peculiarly divided, but that's historical, obviously. And if it was 10 metres, if I'm right in what he said, I mean, would that not impede the actual construction of the stables you're talking about? I mean, has that been taken into account?
Yeah, so where our proposed stable block would be is not at all in that common access route. It's the bit to the right of it that is owned, and I have got all the details here. I don't know if the planners have got access to that, but all 3 areas of the field would be sectioned off, and that doesn't wouldn't impose on the sort of shared access route at all. That's separate. Sorry.
If there are no more questions, well, we'll get to discussion in a
haven't
second.
seen
It is.
that.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to withdraw. Questions to officers, please.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant referred to her being unaware of any regulations surrounding the distance, the minimal distance between a stable block and other residential houses. May I just ask, is there any such ruling at all that we should be aware of?
No, not that we're aware of.
Open it up to discussion. I was inclined to agree with Councillor Tucker. It's a shame that we haven't got a drawing that shows the actual land ownership. I have a concern that it's okay having an application for equestrian use and an application for stables on the land that's being used for equestrian use. But effectively, we were asked to now give planning consent for equestrian use on two other sets of land, but with no provision for stabling or any other facilities. And we'd be asking a lot of questions if that came in as separate applications. But we are where we are. We have an application that we have. It's a shame that that question hasn't been asked and the land division been shown to us. Yes, Councillor.
I'm not a horse person. I mean, I know nothing about horses, but perhaps Councillor Tucker could help on this. I mean, the distance away that the stable is from the house, is that, or could that be a problem? I mean, I can see that being so far away, it would be easy for people to come in and take the horses, for instance, from the gate, which is much closer than the people are, and they're not going to be in their loft looking out all the time.
Do you answer that one? Well, all I can say from a personal point of view, I would want the stables much closer to me, so that you can see them. In our new plan, we are having phraseology which says that stables would not be allowed unless they are easily sort of accessible and visually to the house that they connect with. The fact that we're having it said to us there are so many houses along a road, that half those people won't know anything about horses anyway, and it's not up to them to keep an eye on if horses are in a stable. All kinds of things can go wrong with horses. I mean, they're lovely, but they can be a problem. But I mean, where you put your stables for your own horses is entirely up to you. If anything goes wrong, well, you know, I personally would not put them as far away, but that's me personally, and I don't know many people who would want them that far away. But that's up to the applicant.
I mean, the only other thing that troubled me slightly was that that land at the end there seemed to sort of dip away when we were on the viewing panel, and it sort of sloped down one way. I'm not quite sure where the stables are in relation to the dip.
Any other? Yes, Sven.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the only comment I would make is that it seems very appropriate to me that the stable should be sited close to the vehicle access off the road, because if they're going to need to bring in horse boxes, etc., etc., it's not very attractive to have to trundle them all the way across the field. I mean, I think one might take that into consideration, as well as the visual distance between the stable and the house which owns the stables.
Well, have we got any motions anybody's prepared to put here? David, you're sighing there.
I mean, clearly I'm with Councillor Van in terms of my knowledge of equine, but in terms of what I could see in terms of a planning application before us, I see no reason why we can do anything other than approve this. My only concern, like your own, Chairman, I think was I was a bit bemused by the land division, and even, dare I say, from the commentary we had from the other owner when we were on site, where there seemed to be this sort of broader approach to equestrian use, which doesn't seem covered quite by this application. But I presume, and the officers would say this, I guess, that if there's any other extended use of the site by any of the other owners, they would have to be the subject of separate applications. They couldn't just, it seems to me, latch on for the application that we have before us. But if that is the case, then I can see no reason why this application should be anything other than approved, and I'd recommend it for approval, Chair.
Yeah, I think possibly the implication is that we might not be surprised to see 2 further applications for stables on the other plots, would be my expectation. Officers would like to enlighten us on something.
Chair, just in response to the point raised by Councillor Potter there, the only condition being proposed is that it's effectively restricted to recreational use of the forces. So, in theory, any other property sort of backing onto it could use it, so long as it's still recreational. The other way to look at this would be, even if it was a whole site with just one red line and one intended ownership, there'd be nothing in planning terms to stop someone from then subsequently subdividing it. So I suppose all that's happened is that the applicants put forward the now situation as part of the application.
Councillor Tucker?
Sorry, can I just double check that the people who own the other 2 will be made aware of the conditions of this application, that the land that they own? We've got the applicant is being given, possibly, hopefully, for a permission with restrictions that it should be used for personal recreational use.
My understanding is those restrictions will apply to the whole of the land, because the equestrian use applies to the whole of the land.
It's just that the gentleman that we met referred to having livery on the land, which worried me slightly. But it might be that he didn't know quite the difference between livery and...
It would be our normal process to effectively send a decision notice to the applicant or agent. What we could do in this instance is simply make the other properties aware of the decision as it's been issued. Yes, please.
It was proposed and seconded. Those in favour of approval? That's approved. Officers, please comment.
The application's been approved, subject to conditions outlined within the report.
We now have, thank you very much, yes, you got it. Happy smile. We now have several applications for telecommunications facilities. I have had no representations from anyone. 2 are in my ward, 1 Councillor Sanders' ward, and 1 in Councillor Sherlock's ward, and none of us have anything to say about them. I propose, unless somebody has anything to say, I shall move from the chair. Somebody like to second me?
Yeah.
All right. Those in favour? Approved. Thank you. That's all of them. Right. Thank you. Yes. And officers, just so that you know, that officers are saving all the complex and difficult applications for our next meeting, when I shall be in the south of France, and Councillor Sherlock will be in very fit condition to chair the meeting. So thank you all. And it is not yet 7:43. Sunset has not occurred. David.
As a point of information, how many holidays can a chairman have in any given year?
I will have missed 3 meetings of the routine meetings of this committee, but attended 2 additional ones.